She asked a complete stranger to pretend to be her boyfriend. What she did not know was that he was the most dangerous man in New York City. Isabella Romano was a successful lawyer with everything except the one thing her family cared about: a man. Every holiday was the same humiliation: the pitying looks, the cruel questions, the whispers that she was broken. So when she saw a devastatingly handsome stranger in her office building, she did something insane. She asked him to fake a relationship with her. Just one night. Just to shut her family up. He said yes. But there was something he did not tell her. His name was Dante Moretti, and he was about to become the head of the most powerful mafia family on the East Coast. What started as a desperate lie became a love story written in danger and diamonds. But when his enemies discovered her existence, Isabella had to make an impossible choice: run from the man she loved, or step into a world where one wrong move could cost her everything. Stay with me until the end. This story will change how you think about love, courage, and the power of taking risks. This story teaches us that sometimes the most terrifying decisions lead to the greatest love. That being vulnerable with the wrong person can destroy you, but being vulnerable with the right person can transform your entire life. And most importantly, that you deserve to be seen and chosen exactly as you are. Snow fell on Manhattan, but Isabella saw none of its beauty from her office window. Her hands were numb on the keyboard. A legal brief blurred in front of her as panic squeezed her chest. Her phone buzzed again with a text from her mother. "Your father and I are so excited to see you. Please bring someone this year." She closed her eyes against the familiar burn of tears. Last Christmas, her Uncle Vincent had asked if she was a lesbian. When she said no, he suggested she was too picky or too focused on her career. He made her feel broken. The truth was, she was a successful lawyer at a top Manhattan firm. She owned a beautiful apartment. But to her family, none of that mattered. They only saw the empty chair next to her. The office was nearly empty at 9 p.m. on a Friday. Isabella stayed late because work felt less lonely than her apartment. Then she heard a voice from the hallway, speaking rapid Italian. It was a rough musical dialect from another time, and it sounded dangerous. Curiosity made her stand. She picked up her coffee mug and walked toward the sound. That is when she saw him. He was on the phone by the window with his back to her. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his black suit. When he turned, her breath caught in her throat. He was impossibly handsome, with features that looked like they were cut from stone. His dark eyes were so intense, they felt like they could see every secret she kept hidden. A thin scar sliced through his left eyebrow. It was his only flaw, and it made him more captivating. He ended his call, his eyes never leaving hers. They stood in silence as the air in the room grew heavy and charged. "I am sorry," Isabella said, her voice barely a whisper. "I did not mean to interrupt." "You interrupted nothing," he replied. His voice was deep, with an accent that made the words feel like a touch. "I am Dante," he said, walking toward her with the deadly grace of a hunter. "Dante Moretti," she replied with her own name, Isabella Romano, and offered her hand. His grip was warm and firm, sending a shock up her arm. He held her hand a moment too long. "Romano," he said, his expression changing slightly. "Are you Italian?" "My grandparents were from Sicily," she explained. "His were from Naples." "Why are you here so late?" Isabella asked. She had never seen him at the firm before. "I do not work here," Dante said with a faint smile. "I had a meeting about some business." He spoke in a way that offered no details, and her instincts flared. Just then, her phone buzzed with another message from her mother. "Darling, I need to know for the seating chart." Isabella let out a groan of pure frustration. "Is everything all right?" Dante asked, and his voice held real concern. "No," she said, and then gave a sharp laugh. "Family," Dante stated. It was not a question. He understood her problem completely. "How did you know?" "I know that kind of stress," he said. "The holidays tend to bring out the absolute worst in people." A real smile touched Isabella's lips. "That is exactly right," she said. My family is obsessed with my love life. Every holiday is an interrogation about why I am still single. They think I am too picky or that I chose my career over a husband. My mother sends me dating profiles. My cousins look at me with pity. I am just tired of being treated like I am not enough because I do not have a man. She stopped, suddenly embarrassed for revealing so much. I am sorry, she said. Why am I telling you this? Because strangers are honest, Dante said softly. There is no history. She looked at him more closely then. His suit was custom tailored. His watch was a Patek Philippe that cost more than her car. There was a coiled power about him, a sense of danger just beneath the surface. What kind of business are you in? She asked him. He answered smoothly, import and export. It sounded like a lie. My family has interests in restaurants and real estate. The usual. It did not feel usual at all. Before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. Can I ask you something completely insane? Dante's scarred eyebrow lifted. Crazy questions are always the best ones. Would you be my fake boyfriend for one night? The moment she said it, she wanted to disappear. Her face burned with shame. Oh my God, I cannot believe I said that. Forget I said anything. She turned to run, but his hand gently caught her wrist, stopping her. Wait, he said. Tell me more. My family has a Christmas party in 3 days in the Hamptons, she explained, her heart pounding. I just thought if I brought someone with me, they would finally leave me alone. Stranger, this is a terrible idea. Forget everything I said. Dante did not release her wrist. His thumb rested on her pulse, and she was sure he could feel her heart hammering. What would this deal involve? He asked, his voice low. Just one night? Isabella nodded, not daring to hope. One night. Christmas Eve dinner for a few hours. You would only need to act like my boyfriend. We would need a story about us, but that is all. And what is my payment? Isabella's hope vanished. She had been so consumed by her own problem, she forgot he would want something. I can pay you, she said. I know that sounds awful, but I have money saved. His face changed. A dark, offended look passed over his features. I do not want your money, Isabella. Then what do you want? She asked. He was silent for a moment, studying her face. Then his small smile returned, the one that never reached his eyes, but made him look even better. How about a trade? You act as my girlfriend for a family event, and I will act as yours. A fair exchange. Isabella stared. You need a fake girlfriend? A man who looks like you? Especially a man who looks like me, Dante said with a hidden meaning. My family has expectations. They have specific people in mind for me. Bringing someone they do not expect, someone real and beautiful who is not from my circle, would fix some of my problems. Beautiful. The words stayed in the air between them. Isabella felt a blush rise on her neck. So, we are helping each other, she said. Exactly. No money, no duties beyond the dinners, just two people fixing their own problems. He offered his hand. Do we have a deal? Isabella looked from his hand to his face. Her logical mind screamed that this was a mistake. He was a stranger. She knew nothing about him. This could end badly in so many ways. But the desperate part of her, the part that was tired of being judged, was much louder. She took his hand. Deal. His grip was strong and warm. When he smiled this time, it was real. The corners of his eyes crinkled, making him look absolutely stunning. We need to exchange phone numbers, he said, taking out his phone. And we should meet before the dinners to get our stories straight. Right, Isabella agreed, trying to act professional even as her hand tingled. When is your family event? New Year's Eve, Dante replied. My mother is having a formal party. You will need a nice dress. I can get one for you. I have dresses, Isabella said, a little defensively. I go to formal events. Of course, Dante said, though his eyes looked amused. I did not mean to offend you. My mother just has very specific old-world taste. She will examine everything. Great, Isabella whispered. No pressure at all. They swapped numbers and Dante typed on his phone. I am sending you my address. Visit tomorrow around noon. We can have lunch and plan everything. We have to be believable. Your address? Isabella asked, suddenly afraid. Should we not meet in public? Dante watched her for a second. I am going to be honest, he said. If we do this, we have to trust each other. My life is not simple. People watch me, they follow me. If we want our families to believe this, we need to be comfortable together, and we need privacy. People watch you? Isabella's mind raced. What business did you say you were in? Import and export, Dante said again. But his voice held a warning. And that is all you should know for now. If you are not comfortable, we can call this off. Isabella knew she should leave. Her instincts told her this man was dangerous, but she saw a strange honesty in his eyes that made her trust him. Tomorrow at noon, she said. Send the address. Dante's smile was one of approval. I will send my driver for you. That is not necessary. It is, he insisted. My home is not easy to find, and if we are dating, I would not let you take a taxi. His old-fashioned manners should have been strange. Instead, she felt a pleasant warmth inside her. Fine, she said. My address is. He was already holding his phone. She told him her address in Tribeca, and his eyebrows lifted. Nice area. I manage, Isabella said with a small smile. Dante let out a real laugh, deep and warm. I am sure you do. He checked his watch, a very expensive Patek Philippe. I must go. My driver is here. But Isabella, one last thing. Yes? When we are with our families, we must be believable. That means we have to be comfortable touching. Will that be a problem for you? Isabella's throat went dry. His dark eyes were locked on her. No, she said. No problem. Good, he whispered. Then he reached out and gently moved a piece of hair from her face. His fingers stayed on her cheek for a moment. Because you are a beautiful woman, Isabella Romano. It will not be difficult to pretend I am falling in love with you. Then he left, leaving behind the faint smell of his cologne. It was expensive and masculine, and it made her want to follow him. Isabella stood alone, her hand on her cheek where he had touched her, and wondered what she had just done. The next morning, Isabella changed her clothes 4 times. She told herself it was just business, but her hands shook. She finally chose dark jeans, a cream sweater, and nice boots. She wanted to look casual, but professional. At noon exactly, her doorman called. Miss Romano, a driver is here. Isabella took her purse and went downstairs, thinking it would be a normal car. A black Mercedes S-Class with dark windows was waiting. A man in a suit stood by the door. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and watchful eyes. Miss Romano, he said. I am Marco. Mr. Moretti sent me. He opened the door, and Isabella got inside. The car smelled of new leather. Marco started driving into the city traffic. Where are we going? Isabella asked. Mr. Moretti lives in Brooklyn, Marco said. Red Hook, by the water. Isabella knew the neighborhood. It was industrial but becoming popular, with warehouses turned into apartments. It was also far from the center of Manhattan. They crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. The morning sky was a sharp winter blue. When they arrived at Dante's building, Isabella was stunned. It was not an apartment. It was an entire warehouse on the water, 4 stories of red brick and giant windows. It was completely private. This is his home? She asked. One of his homes, Marco answered. He opened her door. The building was magnificent and would cost many millions of dollars. Before she could think about Dante's money, the front door opened. Dante stood there, and her heart jumped. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater that fit his muscles perfectly. His hair was a little wet. In the daylight, he looked even better. Isabella, he said, and the way he spoke her name made her feel a deep warmth. Welcome. She walked toward him, aware of Marco behind her. She saw the security cameras on the building. She felt like she was entering a new world with unknown rules. Thank you for inviting me, Isabella said, and felt silly. This was not a date, but Dante just smiled. Come inside. It is cold. The inside of the warehouse was breathtaking. The entire ground floor was one huge, open room with the ceiling soared 20 feet high. Walls of exposed brick met massive windows that flooded the space with light. The furniture was minimal but clearly expensive, modern pieces in blacks, grays, and creams. She recognized the abstract art from Chelsea galleries. A stainless steel kitchen occupied one corner. This is incredible, Isabella said, turning slowly to absorb it all. Thank you, Dante replied, watching her with obvious pleasure. I had it converted about 5 years ago. I like my privacy. I can imagine, she said, then caught herself. That sounded judgmental. I am sorry. I did not mean. It is fine, he interrupted gently. You are right. To be cautious. You hardly know me, and you are in my home. This whole thing is unusual. That is an understatement, Isabella said, but a smile touched her lips. Dante laughed. Come, let us eat. We have much to discuss. He led her to a dining table already set for two. An older woman, maybe 60, with kind eyes and a warm smile came from the kitchen. This is Rosa, Dante explained. She has been with my family since my childhood. Rosa placed plates of perfectly made carbonara before them. The smell alone made Isabella's mouth water. She had not realized how hungry she was. Eat, Rosa said, in the same firm tone as Isabella's grandmother. You are too thin, both of you. Then she returned to the kitchen. Your family sounds as worried about your relationship status as mine, Isabella remarked, twirling pasta. Dante's expression tightened just a little. My family's concerns are more complicated than that. Isabella tasted the pasta and nearly moaned. It was perfect. Rosa is the best, Dante agreed. He ate with the quiet elegance of a man raised with proper manners. So, Isabella said, should we establish our cover story? How did we meet? Dante set his fork down, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her feel like the only person alive. Let us start with the truth. We met at your law firm. You were working late. I was there for business. We crossed paths in the break room. I was struck by you immediately. The last sentence made Isabella's cheeks grow warm. And I found you interesting, she said carefully. Interesting, Dante echoed, amused. I can work with that. How long have we been together? 3 months, Isabella offered. Long enough to be serious, but not so long that anyone expects us to be engaged. Dante nodded. 3 months. That means we started seeing each other in September. For our first date, Isabella decided, you took me for dinner in Little Italy. You wanted to impress me with your heritage. Dante smiled. Did I succeed? The food was good, she teased. The company was acceptable. Acceptable, he said dryly. Your praise is very generous. Isabella grinned. Fine, you were charming. You told me stories about your childhood in Naples. You were a perfect gentleman, even though I suspect that is not always true. His expression changed, a flicker of danger and amusement in his eyes. You are perceptive. No, not always, but with you I would be. Would be, Isabella thought. For this arrangement. We are pretending, remember? Right, Isabella said, feeling a tightness in her chest. Pretending. They spent the next hour building their shared history. They became exclusive after the second date because Dante did not share. They had spent weekends exploring the city. Isabella had met Rosa, but not his family, making New Year's Eve significant. Dante had met her best friend Claire, but not her family, which was why Christmas Eve was important. What about your parents? Dante asked. My father is a retired accountant, Isabella told him. He is very traditional. My mother was a teacher. They bought their house in Westchester 40 years ago and never left. They are good people who desperately want grandchildren. Do you want children? The question was direct and far too intimate for a fake relationship. Yet she found herself answering honestly. Someday, maybe, with the right person. I like my life. My career is important. That must sound selfish to someone from a traditional family. Dante shook his head. It sounds honest. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and his face hardened. Excuse me. He stood and walked to the other side of the loft, speaking in fast Italian. Isabella could not hear his words, but she heard the tone. It was cold, commanding, and vaguely threatening. It was a part of Dante she had not seen, and it sent a chill through her. When he came back, his expression was smooth, but his shoulders were tense. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Business," he said. He seemed to correct himself, his voice softening. "Nothing you need to worry about." But that made Isabella worry more. What had she gotten herself into? As if he could read her mind, Dante sat and looked at her seriously. "Isabella, you must understand something. My family is not like yours. They are complicated. There are rules that might not make sense to you, but I promise you will be safe. I will make sure no one hurts you." "Why do I feel like there is a lot you are not telling me?" "Because there is," Dante said with simple honesty. It was startling. Most people would have lied or made excuses, but Dante offered the plain truth. "Can I ask you something?" Isabella said. Dante nodded, his dark eyes watching her. "Are you dangerous?" He was quiet for a long time, as if weighing his response. "I can be," he finally said. "But not to you. Never to you." It should have frightened her. Maybe a small part of her was frightened, but the absolute conviction in his voice made her believe him. The rest of their meal was easier. They discussed safer topics like books and music. Isabella learned he spoke 5 languages, had lived in Naples until he was 15, and loved opera. She told him about law school and her secret love of terrible reality television. By the time Rosa took their plates, Isabella felt she knew him, or at least the part of him he was willing to show, and despite all the red flags in her mind, she liked him. Dante walked her to the door as Marco brought the car around. "We need to practice," he said suddenly. "Practice what?" "Being a couple. We have to be comfortable with each other, comfortable with touch." Before she could answer, Dante moved closer. He did not crowd her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat from his body and smell his intoxicating cologne. "May I?" he asked quietly. Isabella's heart was pounding. "Yes." He reached out slowly, giving her time to back away, and gently cupped her face. His palms were warm and a little rough. The contact sent electricity through her. His thumb swept across her cheekbones as he studied her face, as if memorizing it. "You are beautiful," he said softly. "When I tell you that in front of my family, I want you to believe that I mean it." Isabella began, but her voice was weak. His face was so close to hers now. She could see the individual lashes around his dark eyes. "If I kissed you right now," he murmured, "would you pull away?" Isabella could not breathe. She should say yes. This was just an act. But the word that escaped her lips was no. Dante's eyes darkened with something like hunger and triumph. His thumb traced her bottom lip, and Isabella's eyes fluttered shut. But he did not kiss her. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers. Their breaths mingled between them. "Not yet," he whispered. "When I kiss you, Isabella, it will not be for practice." He stepped back, and she almost fell without his presence to steady her. Marco was waiting. Dante opened the car door for her himself. The perfect gentleman again. "I will pick you up Monday morning at 9, he said. "Bring an overnight bag. We are going to the Hamptons. Your family is expecting us for lunch." "How do you know that?" Isabella asked, her voice laced with confusion. She had not mentioned her parents. "Your mother sent a text this morning," Dante replied smoothly. "You almost canceled, but I talked you out of it." A chill ran through her. "How did you know about the text?" A dark amusement filled his eyes. "I pay attention." The city blurred past the car window as her thoughts raced. This man was dangerous. He knew impossible things, and she should have been terrified. Instead, all she could feel was the warmth of his hands and the echo of his words. When I kiss you, it will be real. Monday arrived far too soon. Isabella packed her small bag 3 separate times, completely uncertain about what to bring. At precisely 9 in the morning, the doorman buzzed. Dante was downstairs. She took a final, steadying breath and went to meet him. He waited by the elevators, a vision in dark jeans and a sweater under a wool coat that cost a fortune. The moment he saw her, a smile broke across his face that nearly buckled her knees. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be," she managed. Without a word, he took her bag. He slung it over his shoulder effortlessly and placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her outside. The touch was brief, but it sent a shock of warmth through her. Marco was waiting with the Mercedes, and this time Dante joined her in the back. As they drove toward Long Island, he turned to face her. "Nervous?" "Terrified," she confessed. "My mother will question you relentlessly. My father will judge your every move. My uncle will say something awful. They will all be watching, deciding if you are good enough." "Good enough for you?" "For the life they imagine for me." Dante took her hand, his fingers weaving through hers. The gesture felt surprisingly familiar and warm. "Then we will convince them," he said with simple confidence. The 2-hour drive passed easily as they fleshed out their fake history and talked about their real lives. He asked about her legal cases with genuine interest, while she cautiously inquired about his business. He avoided details, but spoke of managing diverse enterprises. Soon, they arrived at the Hamptons' house, a large colonial home her parents had worked their entire lives to afford. It was a beautiful home, white with black shutters, a picture of classic tradition. The driveway was already full. Her aunt and uncle were here. Isabella's stomach twisted into a knot. "Last chance to run," she murmured. Dante squeezed her hand. "I do not break my promises, Isabella." "Neither do I," she admitted. "Then let us go." He moved with effortless grace, opening her door and retrieving her bag. His manners were impeccable, a practiced old-world charm. Her mother must have been waiting by the window. The front door burst open before they even hit the first step. Her mother, Maria Romano, rushed out, a whirlwind of perfume and energy. The tiny woman's focus was entirely on the man beside her. "And who is this?" "Mom," Isabella began, her voice tight. "This is my boyfriend, Dante Moretti." The word boyfriend felt alien. Dante, however, was flawless. He offered her mother a warm smile and his hand. "Mrs. Romano, it is a pleasure. Isabella has told me wonderful things about you." Maria waved off the formality, her eyes sparkling. "Call me Maria! Isabella, he is so handsome!" "Mom!" Isabella groaned, mortified. Her mother just laughed, pulling them inside. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon. Her father, Robert, appeared from his study. He was tall and reserved, the opposite of her mother. "Dad, this is Dante." Robert offered a hand, and Isabella saw the silent test in the gesture. It was a firm, assessing grip, and Dante matched it perfectly. "Mr. Romano," Dante said with respect. "Thank you for welcoming me." Robert nodded. "Maria mentioned you are in business." "Import and export," Dante answered easily. "My family has interests in shipping, real estate, and restaurants." "Sounds successful," Robert noted. "It keeps me busy," Dante said, then added with perfect timing, "But Isabella keeps me busier. She is reminding me there is more to life than work." It was the ideal answer. Robert's stern face softened and Maria beamed, taking Dante's arm to lead him away. The living room buzzed with the chaos of her entire family. But the moment Dante walked in, the room fell silent. He was like a figure from a film, tall and handsome with an undeniable aura of power. Dressed impeccably, he was a creature of sophistication dropped into their ordinary world. "Everyone," Maria announced, "this is Isabella's boyfriend, Dante." Her cousins exchanged a wide-eyed glance that screamed, "Where on earth did she find him?" Her Uncle Vincent rose, his gaze sharp and unfiltered. He gripped Dante's hand in the same hard test her father had used. "You Italian?" he demanded. "From Naples, originally," Dante replied, completely calm. "Good. We are Sicilian," Vincent stated. "My grandparents were from Palermo," Dante said. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "Palermo? Their names?" "Giovanni and Lucia Romano," Dante answered without a pause. A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, crossed her uncle's face before he nodded. "Romano. A good family." The afternoon was a whirlwind. Dante was flawless. He charmed her mother, debated economics with her father, and expertly handled Vincent's probing questions. He even had her cousins laughing with a wild story about a cooking class disaster. "That never happened," Isabella protested. "Embellishment is key to a good story," he grinned. "You set an oven mitt on fire," she corrected, but she was smiling. To her astonishment, she was actually enjoying herself. Somehow, he fit in perfectly. He played the part of the devoted boyfriend so well that she almost forgot it was a lie. Almost. Every light touch sent a jolt through her that felt intensely real. After the meal, her mother cornered her in the kitchen, her eyes wet with emotion. "Isabella, he is wonderful." "I know. Where did you possibly find him? Why did you keep him a secret?" "We wanted to be certain," Isabella lied, the words coming more easily now. "He loves you," her mother declared. "I see how he looks at you, like you are the only one in the entire world." Isabella's throat closed up. "Mom, please do not jump to conclusions." "Too late," Maria whispered. "I am already planning the wedding. Your father even likes him." "Please," Isabella begged. "We are taking it slow." But her mother just hugged her. "I am just so happy. You deserve this." Her family saw her as a project to be fixed. When she returned to the living room, Dante was deep in conversation with her father and Uncle Vincent. The men spoke Italian, their nods showing a respect she had never earned. Angela, her cousin, whispered, "Vincent looks impressed. He is never impressed." "You did good." Isabella's voice was sharp. "He is also kind." She hated that she had to defend him or herself. But power was the only thing her family understood, and Dante had it. He was her only shield. The afternoon was a trial by fire. Isabella watched, tense, as her family launched one veiled interrogation after another. But Dante was untouchable. When her uncle demanded to know his intentions, Dante's answer was simple. "My only intention is Isabella's happiness." When her aunt asked about wanting a family, he looked at Isabella. "That is a decision we will make together." When a cousin asked if it was serious, he took Isabella's hand. With her, everything else just fades away. Each answer was perfect. It was a sincere performance of a beautiful lie. The way he looked at her felt real. His intense gaze made her forget they were pretending. For a moment, she believed it all. As the party ended, her mother Maria pulled Dante aside. Isabella watched them from across the room. Her mother spoke quietly, then gave him a tight hug. His expression softened in a way she had never seen. Later, walking to his car, she had to ask, "What did my mother say?" He answered softly. "She said I am good for you, that I am welcome here any time." "Does that feel strange?" she asked. "Being welcomed into something that is not real." Dante stopped walking. His hand was warm in hers. "What if we made it real?" he asked quietly. The world seemed to stop. "What?" He turned to her in the darkness. The porch light carved shadows on his face. "Isabella, what if we stop pretending?" "I do not understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "From the moment I met you," he began, his hands rising to frame her face, "I have not been able to think of anyone else. This was supposed to be a simple arrangement," he said, "but it is not simple for me anymore." Dante. She could barely breathe his name. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I have to know. Do you feel this too?" Her mind screamed that he was a stranger, a dangerous man. but her heart gave a different answer. Yes, she whispered. I feel it too. A shudder went through him, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss started soft, uncertain, but she gripped his coat, pulling him closer. And something between them finally broke. His kiss turned demanding, filled with the unspoken tension that had existed since they first met. His hands were in her hair, and she pressed against his solid frame, her own hunger surprising her. When they pulled apart for air, he rested his forehead on hers again. This complicates things, he said, but a smile touched his lips. I know, she replied. Fear should have been her first response. Instead, she felt a profound sense of rightness, as if she had been waiting for him all along. The drive home was different. He held her hand the whole way, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. The silence between them was no longer empty, but filled with a new promise. At her building, he walked her to the door. I will see you on Christmas Eve, he said. I will pick you up at 4. She nodded. Thank you for today. He gave her that devastating smile. It was easy because of you. He kissed her again, a soft promise this time. Then he was gone, leaving her to wonder what she had just started. The next few days were a blur. Her mind was always on Dante. They sent text messages back and forth constantly. He sent a picture of Rosa teaching him to make pasta. She sent one of her disastrous attempts at wrapping gifts. When do I learn about your family? She texted on December 23rd. New Year's Eve, he replied. A formal dinner. You will meet everyone important. That sounds intimidating, she wrote. He answered immediately. You will be fine. I will be with you. The simple words warmed her entire body. On Christmas Eve, Isabella took extra care getting ready. She chose a deep green dress that was both elegant and understated. When she saw her reflection, she saw a woman who looked genuinely happy. Dante arrived at exactly 4 o'clock. He stood at her door in a charcoal sweater, holding a bouquet of white roses. You are beautiful, he said, his voice full of a sincerity that made her blush. You look good too, she managed. He gave her the flowers, then pulled a small box from his pocket. This is for your mother. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet. Dante, you should not have. I wanted to, he said. It is a sign of respect. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to her eyes. At her parents' house, the familiar chaos of the holiday was in full swing. Laughter and music filled the air. Her family had gathered for the traditional Christmas Eve feast of the 7 fishes. It was a tradition her Sicilian grandmother had started decades ago. Dante moved through it all with an easy grace. He helped her mother in the kitchen and talked sports with her father. He even got on the floor to play with the small children, letting them knock down the towers he built. But his focus always came back to Isabella. His hand would find hers. His eyes would find hers across the crowded room. When she laughed, he smiled, as if her joy was the only thing that mattered. After dinner, they all gathered to exchange small gifts. When Isabella opened Dante's gift, she saw it was a first edition of her favorite book. She had only mentioned it once. He remembered. Dante, she whispered, her fingers tracing the old leather cover. This is too much. It is not enough, he said, his eyes locked on hers. Nothing would be enough. Her family watched, their approval a warm presence in the room. Later, they found a quiet moment alone on the back porch, the winter stars bright above them. Thank you for all of this, she said, for being so perfect with my family. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. His warmth was a shield against the cold. I should be the one thanking you, he said, his voice rough. You reminded me what a family should be. What do you mean? My family, he said, choosing his words with care, is not like this. There is no warmth. Everything is a transaction. Everything has a price. Being with him, with them, felt like remembering a part of herself she had forgotten. Isabella turned to face him. Tell me about your family. Dante's expression grew dark. Not yet. After New Year's, when you meet them, then we can talk, and you will understand. A chill went down her spine. "You are scaring me," she confessed. He cupped her face in his hands. "I am sorry. I only need you to trust me." "Do you?" Logic told Isabella to say no, to demand answers and complete honesty. But his eyes held a raw vulnerability that silenced her rational mind. "I trust you," she whispered. "That is enough for now," Dante said, kissing her gently. The week flew by in a series of stolen moments. He brought takeout to her apartment. He cooked simple pasta for her at his warehouse, a recipe from Rosa. They talked for hours, building something real on a strange foundation. Their kisses were passionate, leaving her dizzy, yet he never pushed for more. His restraint was more alluring than any aggressive move. On the morning of New Year's Eve, a car arrived for Isabella. A garment bag was inside, with a note in his bold script. "Wear this tonight. You are always the most beautiful woman in the room." The gown was black silk, timeless and elegant. It fit as though it were made just for her. A velvet box held a pair of simple, stunning diamond earrings. They were real, worth more than she earned in 6 months. But it did not feel like a transaction. It felt like armor for the battle ahead. At 7 in the evening, Dante arrived to get her himself. He wore a tuxedo, and the sight of him stole her breath. He was impossibly handsome, a powerful man whose entire focus was on her. "You look," he began, trailing off as his gaze swept over her. "Perfect. Thank you for the dress," she said. "And the earrings are too much." "They are not enough," he replied, just as he had about the book. He offered his hand. "Ready?" "No," she admitted. "But let's go." They drove out of the city, heading north into Westchester, where the houses grew larger until they turned down a private road. A mansion stood at the end, lit up like a scene from a film. Isabella's stomach clenched. "Dante, whose house is this?" "My mother's," he answered quietly. "Before we go inside, I need to tell you something." She saw the tension in his face. The confident man was gone, replaced by someone nervous. "My family," he began, taking a deep breath. "They are complicated. What we do is not exactly legal." Isabella's heart froze. "What do you mean?" "I am not a good man, Isabella," he said, his voice rough. "I have been part of things you would find repulsive. My family is what people call the mob, the Mafia." He paused, then forced the words out. "I will be the next head of the Moretti family." The confession hung in the air. The Mafia. It all suddenly made sense. The vague business, the money, the constant watchfulness. A sense of danger was his shadow. She knew she should run, but instead she heard herself ask, "Why did you wait to tell me?" "Because I was selfish," he said simply. "I wanted you to know me first. I was afraid you would not give me a chance if you knew the truth." "Are you in danger?" she asked. "Always," he admitted. "Will you put me in danger?" "Never," he answered fiercely. "I will protect you with my life. No one in my world will ever touch you." Her mind was a whirlwind. This was insane. She was a lawyer. She could not be with a mobster. It was a violation of everything she stood for. But her heart argued with her head. "Do you hurt innocent people?" "No," Dante said. "We have rules. We do not involve civilians, women, or children. Our business is with others who chose this life." "Can you get out?" she asked. "There is no way out," he said softly. "This is my blood. I was born into this, and I will die in it. But I can keep you separate. You would only have to accept that it exists." Isabella looked at this dangerous, beautiful man who had shown her such patience and gentleness. Every rational instinct told her to leave, but she remembered his kindness to her family, and the way he looked at her as if she were precious. "I should go," she said. "Yes, you should," he agreed, his eyes full of pain. "I will not stop you." But Isabella reached out and took his hand. "I am not going." Dante's eyes widened in shock. "I am not saying I approve of this, but I want to understand more. I want to meet your family and see your world. Then I will make my choice." "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No," she said honestly, But I am certain about you. Maybe that is enough to start. He pulled her into a tight embrace. You are either the bravest or the craziest woman I have ever met, he whispered into her hair. Probably both, she said, a small smile on her face. The mansion's interior was even more stunning than the outside. Dozens of people in expensive clothes turned as Dante entered with her. A woman's voice called his name. She was around 60, elegant and beautiful, with her son's intense eyes. Diamonds adorned her as if they were nothing special. She moved with an air of absolute authority. Mama, Dante said formally, this is Isabella Romano. My mother, Francesca Moretti. Signora Moretti's sharp eyes assessed Isabella. Romano, she said, Sicilian. My grandparents came from Palermo, Isabella answered, her voice steady. A flicker of something changed in Francesca's expression. Good blood. She circled Isabella like a predator studying its prey. The dress is well chosen, the diamonds are appropriate, you carry yourself with confidence. She stopped directly in front of Isabella. But are you strong enough for him? I do not know, Isabella said with honesty. But I am ready to find out. Francesca watched her for a moment longer before a cool smile appeared. I appreciate directness. Come, meet the rest of the family. The evening felt like a dream. Dante introduced her to a line of uncles, cousins, and associates. They were all polite and respectful, but she felt their eyes on her, judging her suitability. One older man with silver hair and cold eyes watched her most intently. He approached them near the bar. Dante, introduce me, he said. Uncle S. Dante's voice was tight. This is my girlfriend, Isabella Romano. Salvatore Moretti's cold gaze locked on her. You are a lawyer, he stated. Yes, she confirmed, wondering how he knew. And you know what this family is? Dante told me, she replied with care. Does it not concern you? She considered a diplomatic answer, but his eyes demanded the truth. I am terrified, Isabella admitted, but what I feel for Dante is stronger than my fear. A brief hint of what might have been approval crossed Salvatore's face. Uncle S called her brave, or maybe foolish. He said only time would tell. Then he left, and Isabella could not stop shaking. Dante's voice was a low whisper in her ear. You did well. Uncle S is the hardest one to please. Dinner was a formal, endless parade of perfect food. Isabella sat between Dante and his cousin, a younger man named Marco. So you are the one, Marco said, his smile genuine. Dante has been a ghost for years. All work, no life. It is good to see him smile. Was he unhappy? She asked. Marco grew serious. Our life is not easy. There is constant pressure and real danger. Dante is being shaped to lead, so he carries the heaviest burden. It makes him slow to trust anyone. But he trusts you, Marco said, his gaze direct. That is important. After dinner, they danced. Dante pulled her onto the floor as a string quartet began to play. You are doing so well, he murmured, holding her close. They all approve of you. Your Uncle S is terrifying, Isabella confessed. He should be, Dante replied. He is a terrifying man, but he saw your strength, and he respects that. They moved together, and she let herself melt into his arms. The night was overwhelming, but not in the way she had feared. These were dangerous people, but they were not monsters. They were a complicated family, bound by a code she could not yet read. Near midnight, Francesca asked for quiet. The room fell silent. She stood on a platform, her presence filling the entire space. Tonight we welcome a new year, she announced, but we also mark a transition. This spring, my son Dante will become the official head of this family. Applause filled the room. Dante's face remained a careful mask, but Isabella felt him tense beside her. This role demands great responsibility, Francesca said. It demands strength and loyalty, but it also requires a partner. A man cannot lead this family alone. Her eyes found Isabella. I have had the pleasure of meeting Isabella Romano tonight. She is a woman of intelligence and courage, a woman who understands who we are and has chosen to stand with my son. There was more applause, but now all eyes were on Isabella. Heat rose in her cheeks. If Dante makes this a permanent bond, Francesca declared, she will have my blessing. The meaning of those words hit Isabella like a physical blow. This was no longer just about dating. This was about joining this life forever. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Dante pulled her closer. 7, 6, 5. I know this is too much, he whispered. 4, 3, 2. But I meant every word. I am falling for you, Isabella. 1. Cheers erupted. Champagne corks popped. Happy New Year. Dante's kiss was not gentle. It was a storm of passion that stole her breath. His hands were in her hair, and she kissed him back with the same desperate energy. She forgot the crowd, the noise, everything but the feeling of his lips and the sound of her own heart. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. She looked into his dark eyes. I am falling for you too, she whispered, even though you are completely crazy. His lips curved into a slow smile. So you will stay with me in this crazy life. I will stay, she said. Heaven help me, I will stay. The ride home was silent. They sat in the back of the car, their hands locked together, the night's events settling around them. At her building, Dante walked her to the door. I know that was a lot to take in, he began. If you need some time. I do not need time, Isabella cut in. I need you to kiss me again. He did not hesitate. He pulled her into a hungry kiss that left her weak. She fumbled with the keys until the lock finally turned. They stumbled through the doorway, never breaking apart. The door clicked shut behind them, and all restraint shattered. Her fingers tore at his tie while his hands moved over her back, pulling her impossibly closer. Are you sure? Dante asked, his voice rough. His eyes burned with desire, but he was still asking. I am sure, she said. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing and carried her to the bedroom. There were no more words, only the sound of breathing and the feel of skin against skin. Much later, they lay tangled in her sheets. Dante traced patterns on her shoulder. I was so careful, he said quietly. I swore I would keep you separate from the darkness in my life. What changed? Isabella asked. You, he said. You changed everything. You see me and you do not run. You make me want to be a better man. You make me believe I can be. You are a better man, she said softly. You are kind and patient. That is who you are, Dante. The rest is just your job. He kissed her forehead. How did I get so lucky? You answered a desperate woman's insane offer in a coffee shop, she smiled. That was not luck. That was fate. In the weeks that followed, Isabella learned to exist in Dante's world. She learned that his family owned restaurants where she never had to pay. She learned he had connections that reached everywhere. People respected him, but they also feared him. She also saw the man he was underneath. She saw him read to children at a community center his family supported. She saw how he cared for Rosa, ensuring the older woman wanted for nothing. He remembered small things about people, showing he cared in quiet ways. Her own family loved him. Maria called him constantly. Robert invited him to play golf. Uncle Vincent, in his highest form of praise, called him a good Italian boy. Isabella kept their relationship secret at her law firm, but her best friend Claire knew. You are dating a mobster, Claire said one afternoon. A real one. I know, Isabella replied. It is complicated. Complicated? It is dangerous. What happens if he gets arrested? What if something worse happens? I know all the risks, Isabella said. I think about them every day. But when I am with him, I feel truly alive. He sees me in a way no one else ever has. And I see him. I see the good parts, and there is so much good in him. Claire looked at her friend for a long moment. then let out a sigh. You love him. I do, Isabella admitted. On Valentine's Day, Dante took her to a restaurant his family owned. It was completely empty, closed just for them. The room was filled with candles and roses. Rosa had cooked for them, a multi-course Italian masterpiece. As they ate, Dante was clearly nervous. His usual confidence was gone. What is wrong? Isabella asked. Nothing is wrong, he said. Everything is finally right. And that is what terrifies me. He stood, and her heart began to hammer in her chest. She knew this moment. Isabella Romano, he started, his voice unsteady. 6 weeks ago, you offered me a crazy deal. Be your fake boyfriend. Keep it simple. But nothing with you is simple. You have turned my world upside down. You made me question everything I thought I was, everything I deserved. He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket. I am not a good man, he continued. My life will never be safe or normal. But I love you. It terrifies me how much I love you. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I refuse to pretend for another day. This is real. He opened the box. Inside was a stunning ring, an emerald surrounded by diamonds. I chose emerald, he said, because it matches the dress you wore at Christmas. That was the night I knew. Tears streamed down Isabella's face. Will you marry me? Dante asked. Will you take this dangerous life and make it our life? Will you be my partner, my strength? Yes, she sobbed. Yes, of course, I will marry you. With trembling hands, Dante slid the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into his arms and they held each other, crying and laughing at the same time. They stood together, caught between the impossible and the inevitable. Isabella leaned against him and whispered, I love you so much. Dante held her tightly, promising, I will spend my life proving I am worthy of you. Their wedding took place in the late spring. It was a perfect union of their separate lives. The ceremony was a traditional Catholic service in a small, quiet church. Afterward, the reception was held at one of Dante's family estates. 2 different worlds came together that day. They found common ground in celebration. Maria wept throughout the entire service. Robert walked his daughter down the aisle, his pride clear in every step. When Dante finally lifted her veil, his hands were completely steady. But his eyes were filled with tears. I see you, he whispered. The words had become their sacred promise. And I will always choose you. The reception felt like a dream. As the sun went down, they danced under glowing strings of lights in the garden. Dante's family gave speeches that were both a warning to anyone who might harm Isabella and a warm welcome into their circle. Isabella's family spoke of the light Dante had brought back into their daughter's life. When they shared their first dance as husband and wife, the world simply disappeared. It was only the 2 of them, moving together. Promises were whispered against skin. Their honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy. Dante took her to Naples, showing her the narrow streets of his childhood. He showed her the restaurant his grandfather had started, the family's first real business. They traveled to the Amalfi Coast and swam in brilliant blue water. They ate food so good, it brought tears to Isabella's eyes. On their final night, they sat on a terrace overlooking the sea. Dante pulled her close and asked quietly, Do you have any regrets? About saying yes to me, to all of this? Isabella considered everything. She thought of the fear and the complications. She knew danger would always exist at the edges of their world. But then she thought of waking up with him each day. She thought of how he looked at her as if she were everything. They were building a life that was strange, but it was theirs. Not for a single second, she answered. You better not, Dante said with intensity. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. When they got back to New York, they settled into their new life. Isabella kept practicing law, but moved to a smaller firm that was less demanding. Dante formally took control of his family, and she watched him lead with a surprising amount of wisdom and care. She grew accustomed to the security details and the careful screening of everyone in their lives. The threat of danger was always there. But she also discovered the deep strength of Dante's family. When her mother fell ill, his family protected her parents as if they were their own. When Isabella took on a difficult case, Dante's network gave her resources she never could have accessed alone. Their worlds had merged more completely than she ever imagined. 1 year after they were married, Isabella told Dante she was pregnant. He wept, an emotion she had rarely seen from him. Their daughter Lucia was born in February, with dark eyes and stunning features. They named her after Dante's grandmother and her mother, Maria. As Isabella watched Dante hold their small child, she finally understood the man she had married. He was capable of great darkness, but he was also capable of incredible love. And with her and their daughter, he chose love every single day. Late at night, when Lucia was asleep, Isabella would remember that moment in the break room. She was just a desperate woman with a crazy idea. How could she have known that one question would change her entire world? She never imagined a fake arrangement could become so real. She never thought a Christmas lie could become a lifetime of truth. Dante would sometimes find her smiling at nothing. "What are you thinking about?" he would ask. "Just how this all began," Isabella would reply. "The fake engagement. The impossible plan." He would pull her into his arms and whisper, "Nothing about us was ever fake, Isabella. The situation was, maybe. But what I felt for you was always real. I was just waiting for you to feel it too." Years went by. Lucia grew and was joined by a brother they named Roberto, after Isabella's father. The children learned to navigate both sides of their family. They learned Italian, the importance of family, and the meaning of loyalty. They went to Isabella's family events where cousins ran free, and Maria always cooked too much. They also attended Dante's family functions, where traditions were followed with deep respect. Within the family, Isabella became known as Dante's conscience. She was the only one who could challenge his harsher instincts. He trusted her judgment without question. He even brought her into discussions about family business, something unheard of for past generations. She was careful to stay away from the criminal side, but she helped him steer the family toward legitimate work without abandoning his people. For their 10th anniversary, Dante brought Isabella back to the restaurant where he had proposed. He arranged for the same candles and the same perfect food from Rosa. But this time, Isabella had her own surprise. She gave him an envelope. "What is this?" he asked. She just smiled. "Open it." Inside were legal documents. As Dante read them, his confusion turned into understanding, then shock. "You bought the building," he said. "The coffee shop where we met." Isabella nodded. "It was scheduled to be demolished for new condos. I could not let that happen. That place changed my life. It changed both of our lives. So I bought it. I thought we could make it a community space, a place where people can meet and maybe find their own impossible love." Dante was crying again, the rare tears that only she was allowed to see. "How did I get so lucky?" She took his hands and said, "The same way I did. We both took a risk on something that should not have worked, and we have chosen each other every day since. That is not luck, my love. That is commitment. That is love." Together, they renovated the old coffee shop. On the wall, they hung a small plaque that read, "Where it all began," with the date of their first meeting. Young couples would ask about it, and the staff would only say that it was a love story. The details were not important. The lesson was, sometimes love finds you in the most unlikely of places. Sometimes the person you think is all wrong for you is the one you needed all along. There were difficult days and moments of fear. The darkness of his world was a constant threat. But they always held on to each other. They chose each other. They built a life that was unconventional, but full of happiness. And whenever anyone asked Isabella if she regretted her impulsive proposal to a dangerous stranger, her answer was always the same. It was the best decision I ever made. Because the most amazing love stories can start with a simple question. Will you help me? Will you stand with me? Will you be mine? And if you are truly fortunate, the answer is yes. Not for one night, not for show, but for always. Isabella Romano went into that break room for coffee. She walked out with the love of her life. And Dante Moretti, the man everyone feared, had found the one person who saw past the darkness. He found the person who saw the man who just wanted to be chosen and loved. In the end, they gave each other what they both needed. She was his light. He was her safety. Together, they created something unbreakable. It all began with a lie that became the deepest truth either of them had ever known.